Hello, I'm Sadie Lee. I'm an artist. I make quite realistic paintings of real people who sit for me. My paintings are made up out of quite thin layers of paint that are built up on top of each other. When I'm making a painting, I don't usually put those layers directly down onto a pure white canvas. I usually put a layer of colour down first, and that's called using a ground. Now, painters have used grounds throughout history, and they don't all use the same colour. In his book Techniques of the World's Great Painters, the art critic Waldemar Januszak suggests that artists have used all sorts of colours, including greys, reds and browns. I guess the question is, why do artists use a ground? Well, the reason that I use a ground is because, well, my paints are quite thin. So if I build my painting up, by the time I've got to the top layer, it might still look a bit sketchy. So putting a layer down of colour first gives a kind of opaque quality to the colours that come on top. Here's some shades that are usual grounds that artists use. So we've got a kind of warm red, a grey, and then my preference, which is a mid-green. I've mixed up some kind of generic skin tones just to place a little bit on each of these colours to show you the impact that it can have and how different those skin tones can look when they're placed against a different coloured ground. It just kind of gives more of a solid tone to the flesh when you build it on top. Depending on what the skin tone is of the person that you're painting, you might find that a different coloured ground is going to work better as a starting point. You can lay down an entire layer of ground over the whole thing as your initial stage before you do anything else. I don't actually put my ground down first, I use another method. So I would usually work directly onto a blank canvas, first of all, in pencil or charcoal, and just start off with a little sketch just to kind of decide where everything was going to go. I think that I might have spent a little bit longer doing that drawing if I'd just been doing it for my own pleasure, but let's say that I'm going to stick with that. Next, I'm just going to use something to kind of go over the lines a little bit. I'm just using a burnt umber there, and I'm going to thin it down a little bit and use a sort of fairly thin pencil brush, which is just goes into a little point. And I'm just going to go over it a bit because there might be some drawing marks on there that I've decided that I don't want if I've kind of made a mistake or I've changed my mind about. So I've just thinned my paint down with a bit of water, and I'm just kind of going over the lines that I think that I might kind of need to keep. And it's really just to kind of make them a bit more permanent, because the pencil, if I start to put a ground of green on top of those pencil marks, the pencil won't really show through because it's very, very light. So now that that's dried off, I'm going to take the ground that I've mixed up. If you think you might need a lot of it, it's a good idea to mix it up in a jar that's got a lid, so you can just take out what you need and then put the lid back on, and then it's not going to dry up on your palette. So I'm just going to take a bit of this. I've made it quite thin with some water. This is just acrylic paint with water. And then I'm just going to brush it on to my painting. I've got quite a wide brush, so I'm not worrying too much about where it's going. Just going to cover the whole thing. And you can see as it's going over that kind of brown outline underpainting, you can still see it really clearly. So once that's dried off, that's ready to paint. And the good thing about working in acrylic paint on canvas is that it dries relatively quickly, and I could carry on building this painting up in acrylics if I wanted to. But I think once I've let it dry off, I might then go into oil paint and start to build it up in oil, because acrylic underpainting like this can be quite a nice sort of surface to work on in oil paint, and it really speeds the process up. I hope that this has encouraged you to think a little bit about what goes underneath your painting that might add depth and interest to your final piece. Bye for now.